Hey guys, welcome back to What Next? And this week we're going to go over a late 80s classic, Over the Top. Now, I don't want to say everything that Stallone makes is gold, but it's pretty close to it. Now, if you're a huge Sylvester Stallone fan, like I am, you probably have seen this at least a dozen times across the period of your life. Now, if you haven't seen Over the Top, and whether or not you're a Stallone fan, give this one a watch. This is prime Stallone. Anything outside of Rocky he did. He did a couple of really good action movies, obviously, across the course of his career. This one wasn't necessarily an action movie, but it kind of is. But again, if you haven't seen this one, go watch it. It's actually a movie about a father-son dynamic, but it involves him around the world of competitive arm wrestling. Right? So, again, great movie. If you're a Stallone fan, you know it. If you're a Stallone fan and you haven't seen it, go watch this one. Do yourself a favor and watch this one. You will like it. Okay, so let's jump into it. Since this one has a variety of characters, but I think mainly there's probably about 4 or 5 big main ones that we can kind of wonder about what would have been next. Now, Stallone likes to write sequels. I'm kind of surprised this one never got one, even though I'm pretty sure he would have one. Probably has one written somewhere that just never saw the light of day. So let's get into it. So those of you that have seen it, you know the story, you know what happens. Now, going on what next? So we see the end, Lincoln Hawk and his son driving off into the sunset. Him having won the International Arm Tournament, walked out of there a millionaire with the money he bet on himself and a new truck. So I always wondered, how did their dynamic as a father and son progress? Obviously, he was able to take care of him, but, his son Mike was involved in a lot of other things. He was in military school, so I'm wondering if he was able to kind of send him back to military school. Did he continue on that path? Obviously, he wanted to start his own truck driving company, so with the money he had, I'm sure he was able to do that and get it started. So just more curious as to how that story would have progressed, because I think if he'd have seen a part 2, you would have seen him probably his business is thriving, or who knows, maybe it's struggling again. And then somehow he gets drawn back into the world of competitive arm wrestling. He's got to go defend his title. Maybe he doesn't want to, but maybe something happens to where he's kind of pushed into it to where he does go and compete. Or maybe a few years have gone by and finally people were like, hey, you came out and shocked the world one year and beat everybody. We need you to come do it again. So maybe something along the lines like that. But I was always curious how their relationship progressed, given that, now that Mike's mother has passed, he's living with the father he doesn't know. So they're kind of growing up with each other now and seeing where that goes. So I think that would have been interesting to see how their dynamic played out. Especially for Mike. Like I said, Mike, he's the son. He's moving on. His mother just passed. He's kind of disconnected from his grandfather now, who he's grown up with, and now he's off on his own with essentially his dad, who he's never grown up with. And they have some ups and downs from the movies, but going through the fact that he's a teenager, dad's going to be starting a new company, they got all this money. So I'm just curious how that would have affected him growing up into his teenage years and maybe into adulthood, depending on how much time would have gone on, or how close they would have done a sequel should that have happened. And then with the grandfather, the grandfather, I know he wanted to keep his grandson close. He felt bad. His daughter's dead. His grandson's the only family he's got left. So, at the end, you kind of see him like, okay, yeah, this is where he belongs. He belongs with his father. So I'm just kind of wondering if, maybe after that, maybe he did see the light and it was like, you know what, whether I like it or not, this is my son-in-law or my son's dad. I need to help him. I need to take care of him and my grandson. So I think he would have done the right thing and stepped up and decided to help them both. So hopefully we would have seen that happening. Or it could have gone the other way where he could have just said, you know what, I'm going to double down and try to get, my grandson back to live with me because, he was rich and powerful and had all these connections. So maybe he could have doubled down and try to find some way to get back at Hawk for this. He could have used, Bull Hurley. Who knows? Bull, there's another good one. So Bull, was the man in the arm wrestling circuit. Knew Hawk was kind of up and coming, knew he was, pretty badass. They finally meet head to head in the finals. Hawk beats him. It's kind of like that. All right, good job. You got me on one. So I think Bull would have been like, okay, he got me on one, but I think he'd have spent the next year or whatever it takes in the offseason trying to get him to get back to that spot, because I think he was the type of person to where we need to meet again in the finals. I need to show everybody that I am actually better than you. You're not better than me at all. So I think that might have played in really good. He could have been the the villain or the bully for a sequel, to where he's doing everything he can in his power to try to get Hawk to get back into, or maybe even like a different, bigger arm wrestling tournament, to where he needs to regain that title from him. Because I don't think Bull was going to just sit on that one, being the fact that he kind of showed up in certain spots where he was at and been like, I've been wanting to challenge you all this time. Finally got to it. Lincoln Hawk beats him, takes away his title, because he was, a 4 or 5 time champion at that point. So I don't think he's going to just sit there and let that slide. But, and then Hawk, I'm just curious as to, does he go off and live like a quiet life, being the truck driver he wanted to be, now that he's essentially don't really have to worry about money for the time being? He can start his company. He can go off and be a truck driver. But again, he is going to have to leave his son Mike at home, because, truck drivers are gone for a lot of time, and his son Mike is, he's still essentially a preteen at this point, or early teenager. So that would have been interesting to see how his character progressed into, now that he's got the money, he's got the money, he's got the truck, he can start his own company, get his own roots. He essentially got everything he wanted in the end, but now it's, how does his life go on now that he's got what he wants? Maybe money's not an option, or maybe he blows through it faster than he thinks building his company. But yeah, I think a lot of, there's still a lot of open questions on this. Again, it didn't leave any room for a sequel technically, but there are just those questions of what would have happened if we'd have seen Lincoln Hawk again, and given that, Stallone is known for, doing a lot of sequels for certain things, I think it would have been interesting to see this one. But it never got to happen for whatever reason. But again, so if you guys haven't gotten a chance to watch this one, please do so. All the other wrestling matches, or arm wrestling matches he does across the board throughout the movie, are fantastic, as good as a movie about arm wrestling can be, in my opinion. But again, this is prime Stallone. Great acting, great action sequences for especially the main arm wrestling tournament at the end. You see the men's competition, you see the women's competition. I think in a sequel you could have seen it maybe a little bigger and broader this time, but those are just the questions I was left after watching this movie time and time again. I think I've watched it at least a dozen times over my movie going experience. But if you guys have anything else or questions or things you think I left out on this one, please let me know. Shoot me a DM or put me a message down below. And if not, take care. We'll see you guys next week.